Imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome was not officially a thing until the 1970s. Okay, if you trace it back, there was a seminal paper published in the 1970s by two women, and they didn't even use the phrase imposter syndrome. They titled it imposter phenomenon. And their research paper interviewed women who were in senior managerial roles in large businesses about their experiences and their feelings of confidence and doubt in those roles. Now, there's a few interesting things about that research paper. One is that they invited women to be part of the study who self-identified as having feelings of self-doubt. They didn't have a control group. They didn't ask men, and they only looked at women in higher managerial roles. So that kind of starts to sow the seeds of why is it only seeming to affect women in professional roles? Bear in mind if we put the context of this into place as well. So this is the 1970s. And the 1970s is we're seeing some big changes globally around the way business works and people's roles in business. So for centuries, businesses have been dominated by men. Okay, that's just, if I have to, I'm sorry that that's just, as a bloke, that's just how it was and what I've inherited in walking into that. In the 1970s, we started to see a shift. The 1960s had seen huge social movements in terms of women's lib, the feminist movement coming out. And now in the 1970s, women were starting to gain roles in the workplaces that they hadn't traditionally held before. Now, and this kind of comes back, I think, to something that was shared earlier when we did the roundabout, you know, what have you heard about it? Where do you see it? That point of validation, you know, and anytime we go into somewhere new, we're nervous because it's new. What if we make a mistake? How do we know we're doing it right? Well, what if we're accidentally getting it wrong? So we seek ways to reassure ourselves we're doing stuff right. We seek validation. And the easiest way we seek validation is we look for our peers. We look for people like us who are ahead of us on the path. So I can see that in terms of as a bloke, okay, other men have written books and had them published, so I'm probably not going to be too crazy if I want to publish a book as well. That's probably not going to be too bad. And other people have said to me, you should write a book, and they've had stuff published as well. So again, I've seen people like me do this kind of thing, so I have some comfort from that. In the 1970s, women generally did not see any other women ahead of them in the management echelons in these businesses. There were no role models. And interesting, that idea kind of echoes forward through today, where we think about any group of people in a community where there are no role models for them. So I'm seeing it a lot amongst kind of ethnic communities as well. Communities of color, communities where people are experiencing a disability. That sense of doubt is really powerful because there's no one like them that they can see ahead of them performing well to give that reinforcement. And then that kind of, so that was an interesting thing. So I went forward looking at that. And then I also thought, well, okay, that's kind of where the common parlance of it's come out of. And this is maybe why we think there's this general idea that it only affects women and only in professional roles. But then also started to look at this idea of the treatments, because there's lots of stuff that when you look about the blogs, this is, you know, you keep a gratitude jar, you create a cheerleader squad, and so on. I thought, okay, yeah, this is interesting. So I found all these research papers about how people are affected by it, who's affected by it. Let me now find the research papers about the efficacy, efficiency, and even safety of all of these practices that are being espoused. And I couldn't find any. So there's lots of research about who's affected by this and how does it affect you. There doesn't seem to be any research that I found yet. So if anybody who's here this morning or watching and catch up knows, please let me know, because I am thinking about the second edition and putting some more bits into that. And I can kind of fix that. Absolutely. So because there hasn't been that kind of safety check on these approaches, that for me is the equivalent of going to the doctor with a pain in your leg and saying, doctor, my leg's hurting, assuming of course you can get an appointment and see a doctor. My leg's hurting. And the doctor doesn't even ask you, well, what were you doing before? What things are you doing when it hurts? What's it stopping you doing? And all that. They just say, here's some pills. We haven't tested them. We don't know if they're going to work or not. We don't know if they'll be right for you or not. But this is what we give everyone. So this, now I'm not kind of saying that all of the stuff that people are offering is like snake oil. What I'm suggesting is, from an evidence and research perspective, there isn't the weight of assurance that other mechanisms have yet. So test it, question it. Why is this right for me? You know, there's other sessions I've done for these sessions for freelance heroes in the past, one of which is about business plans. And one of my arguments about business plans is don't waste your time on them. Because actually the research shows us they make a marginal difference in the success of your business. But lots of people say to you, if you're starting a business, you should have a business plan. But very rarely do we ask why. Why is that the best approach for me? Why is this idea of a gratitude chart or a cheerleader squad or whatever? Why is this the right thing for me? Some of you shared this morning some of the things you've developed through trial and error. They're working for you because you've figured that out for yourself. You've done those experiments. So, well, I'll try this, see if that works. I'll try that. And that's really important to work out your own thing.